Between 1700 and 1725, like, it was the golden age of piracy. You might have sailed with me, Mark Reed. You would not have known me as Mary Reed because I sailed as Mark Reed. But I didn't set out to be a pirate by any means, but I did set out to dress as a man from a very young time in my life. And I'll tell you how it came to be that I was sailing on the seven seas as a pirate, and I was captured as a pirate, to be hung by the neck as a pirate, and survived. So you see, my story started in poverty, as most pirate stories do. My mother was raising me and my older brother, and our father had died before I was born, I was told. And then my brother died, and our granny, who lived in London, was a seamstress, see, and so she had a little bit of money and a bedsit, and she had a little bit of money that she would send to my mother, but she would not support a girl. No. And I had to dress in my brother's clothing. From the time I was 8 years old, I dressed in my brother's clothing and lived and played and worked as a boy from the time I was that young. Now then, my dear mother died, and I went up to London to go and live with my grandmam. Well, I certainly hoped that living with my grandmam, I would maybe get a position, or maybe she would get me some education or something. But she just looked at me and said, "You're just another bloody mouth to feed, aren't you?" And I slept on a pile of rags at the bottom of her bed, but was much better than all the stable boys that I worked with. Now, being a stable boy, that's hard work, see? But having a place to live that's not the stable, that's pretty cushy, it is. So I lived with my grandmother, and I worked as a stable boy. And I worked quite hard, see? And my grandmother, well, she died too. I mean, she used to get into the drink, my grandmother did, and she didn't like feeding me, and so I was always a skinny little thing. And she used to say things to me like, "You know, it's a good thing you're a boy, because if you were like that little brat, that little sister of yours, who was born in a time way too late after your father died for me to believe she was my own kith and kin." So I heard from my own grandma's mouth why she didn't want to support me, a girl, and why I had to be a boy. Well, anyway, when she passed on, there I was, with no one and nothing. And, well, I went down to Dover, see, from London, and I got on a ship, because I thought maybe that I could get a job on a ship, you know, because young boys got jobs on the ship all the time. I didn't want to join the Navy. I'll tell you something. Winston Churchill himself said that the history of the British Navy is a history of sodomy, rum, and the lash. So I didn't want to join the Navy, because the lash was like it was like the best case scenario, okay? So anyway, I got on a ship, but some of the stable boys that I knew in London were going over to Holland, see, and they were going to go and join the army. Oh, I thought, join the army, see? So now, in every country in Europe in that time, you might think, well, Mary, aren't you quite the linguist? Bloody, I mean, you can speak Dutch and all that. But you have to understand, in that time, the armies had maybe every third or fourth man was not from the country in which he marched. No, he was from somewhere else. In their own country, they only had like ragamuffins and tatterdemalions and those kind of like rough people, paupers and people they drugged out of jails and like. So you could go join the army if you wanted to, and you got a full set of clothes, so that was nice, and I'd been growing up taller and taller and needed a full set of clothes, and you got a place to live, and you got a place to eat and all of that. Yeah, so I joined the army. Now, some of you might be wondering, because it is advertised, isn't it, that as a pirate, right, that I lived on a ship with all men. You understand that, right? Because no women were allowed on ships back then. And if they found out that you were a woman, I mean, you were thrown off into the water, you know. So you had to disguise yourself right well. Now you might think, well, how do you do the business with the bathroom bit, you know? And you might think that's kind of a delicate question. Some of you are eating, right? So I'm sorry about that. But you're talking to a pirate, okay? So here's the thing. You didn't have to stand in line for the girls' room, because there were no boys' room. See, what they had was they had a hole in the beak of the ship, like a beak head, see? And it had a hole there. And you could sit in it and do what you had to do, just hanging off the edge of the ship there. And that's why they called it the head. And that's why they call it the head now. Or, you know, there were bilges down below. And down below ships, on a pirate ship or a merchant ship, oh my goodness, it was so dark. You might as well have been inside of a cow, really. And actually, they had, you know, chickens and goats and all kinds of things down there to keep, because to have some food on the voyages. So it was dark, it was smelly, it was dirty. Nobody took off their clothing or anything like that. No, 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 that didn't happen. So it was easy enough, and I kept my face dirty. Can you see it? How's it looking there? Do I need some more dirt? I kept my face dirty, and it was no great, you know, trouble to keep my face dirty where a young man would have hair. Well, it's not hard at all, really. So I kept my face dirty. Much harder to keep your face clean on a pirate ship. And I just kept on skipping from ship to ship when I was going around. And, you know, we had the beakhead up there is where we went to the bathroom. But then you had the poop deck. Now, you're not going to be laughing about the poop deck, are you? Come on now. I mean, I just told you where we go to the bathroom, right? So you know it's not at the poop deck. The poop deck, evidently it's Latin. And it's for, isn't it? It's Latin. It's the back end of a ship. It's where they had the deck and they would put out an awning. And also, one of the reasons I heard that they call it the poop deck is because, well, you see, the French sailors, and there were sailors from all over on these ships. In the 1700s, we had French Creole black sailors, we had Spanish, we had Portuguese, Dutch, we had people from all over. But anyway, the French sailors kept their little saints on the poop deck, see. And the English sailors would say, oh, look at that, that's the Frenchman's dolls. And the Frenchmen would say, no, 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 ce n'est pas poupée, ce n'est pas poupée. And they would say, oh, it's a poop deck, that's what it is. There's a poupée there, that's why. But anyway, on the poop deck, you'd hear stories. Now you might think that with this gear here, that I have some pretty important pieces of gear here. You might think that this little devil here is a very important piece of gear, that without it I would not be able to live as a pirate, right? But you know, this thing was useless. Oh my goodness. Look at this thing. I mean, here's how it works, right? You have to pour dry powder in here, and you have to keep it all dry. And then you have to put in a bullet, and then you have to tamp it all down with this thing here. And then over here, you open up this thing, and you stick in a dry piece of paper, like a dry piece of paper on a ship, right? Mind? Okay. So then you pull it back here, and you push that down to keep a dry piece of paper there. And then this here is a flint. That's why this is called a flint lock. And then you're going to pull. Okay, no, I'm going to shoot you. I promise you. I'm almost ready, so don't get so impatient, because I am going to shoot you. Can you imagine how useful this was, right? I mean, so boom, finally you shoot it, and the thing does this in your hand. Well, I mean, it's much better for opening up coconuts, right? I mean, really. Or cracking someone over the head, or making a signal of some sort. It's good for that. And I'll pass it around if you want to take a look at it. It's not a real one, it's a replica. So that was not a very important piece of equipment. Now this was possibly a more important piece of equipment. So you had this, you see, if you're going to be fighting and if you're going to be threatening people, this was a very useful piece of equipment, and also very good for cutting open that coconut you cracked, you know, or slicing up your meat and your salmagundi and all of that like. So it was very good for that, but still, I would say it was not the most important thing that I had as a pirate. You folk from England might know, so I'm getting back out of Ireland, back into it, yeah, right, with my accent. So, it's a problem, I tell you. Anyway, you might think, maybe you think my charts, those are the most important thing that I carry about as a pirate, right? What do you think? They're very important, right? But no, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing you carry about as a pirate is your wits and your stories. And I'll tell you why. Because you're sailing about, and it's very dangerous. That's why those French have their little saints. I mean, it's very dangerous. And it's very, 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 very boring, okay? I mean, I can't even begin to explain to you how boring boring it is to be on a ship with a bunch of people who are stupid, smelly, would steal the teeth out of you if they could get them. And you got to have some good stories.